Hi, welcome to question 8 of the 2025 Leaving Cert Ordinary Level Paper 2. So we'll get stuck in. Question 8 here is dealing with kind of, I suppose, statistics, data, bit of percentages. So we'll read through and make sure we're on the right target. Part A, which is a 5-mark question, says the table below shows the number of new private cars sold in 2023 to the nearest 100, broken down by fuel type. So we see petrol, diesel, fully electric, hybrid, and then the total of all the cars sold. It also shows the percentage of these cars that were of each fuel type correct to 2 decimal places and the size of the angle that would represent each fuel type in a pie chart. Now, part 1 says complete the table above by working out the 2 missing percentages for diesel and for hybrid and the size of the 2 missing angles for diesel and fully electric. Give each percentage correct to 2 decimal places and give the size of each angle correct to the nearest degree. So fill in the missing boxes. Okay. Now I'm going to go with the put the answers in after with the fully electric. Okay. So we know that the total number of people is 100 or cars is 117,400. With the fully electric, the number of cars was 22,500. So we divide them together, we get a number. Now we can convert that to a percentage by multiplying by 100. Okay. And I got 19.17%. So in essence, I'm just testing that. Okay, that's what's happening. Now, I want to find this 69%. If I multiply 19.17 by 360, I get, when I round it, 69%. Okay, so that's the fully electric row done. Now the next one I'll do is diesel. Okay, so the diesel has 25,900 divided by the total. I'm just going to go straight ahead and multiply that by 100 to get a percentage, and I got 22.06%, and I wrote it in on the table. Now, doing the same thing, I'm going to multiply that percentage by 360 because a pie chart has 360 degrees. What's roughly 22% of it? And I came out with 79 degrees. Like 25% would be 90. A quarter of a circle is 90. So that seems legit. Then for the hybrid, okay, they sold 30,300 divided by the total, multiplied by 100. I'm only looking for the percentage, which is 25.81, and I have the table completed. So not that bad a question, okay, but just the amount of words, the amount of different numbers. If you make a stab at getting a percentage by multiplying by 100, then all you need is to figure out what the fraction is. And that's where realizing and understanding the scenario. And in a way, that's what they're testing. Are you able to understand scenarios like this? So take your time reading it. Just think it through. What's going on here? And then you'll have a much better chance of achieving good grade in that question. Now, drawing the pie chart is easy, but make sure you have a protractor. Okay, so wherever you want to start, you put your crosshairs of the protractor along a line, okay, and you'll measure 119 degrees. Make sure you label it and put in the sector. So the question says, use information from the table on the previous page to complete the pie chart for diesel, fully electric, and hybrid. Well, actually, petrol must have already been in there. Okay, actually, I don't have the original. I do. Petrol is already in there, and I know it's orientated differently on this thing. So we're starting off from maybe this line here and measuring, what do I have next? Diesel, measuring 79 degrees off that. Okay, might be something like that. Okay, and that's represented there. So hopefully it's not too bad, but again, if you don't have a protractor, you're going to be guessing. Make sure you use a ruler so at least the lines are straight. Okay, but obviously if you have a protractor, that makes this question much, much more achievable. And it's kind of a learning outcome that would be assumed knowledge from arguably primary school. Okay. Now, part B, part 1 says the scatter plot below shows that the fuel efficiency of 10 popular petrol car types and their engine sizes are given below. And you see here the fuel efficiency maybe of about 18 kilometers per liter, pretty good. And you see it's dropping away. Okay, they're getting less efficient as the size of the engine goes up. And that's kind of a classic thing. If you want to have a fuel efficient car, the smaller the engine, the less fuel it's burning, the less it costs to run. Okay. Now it says there is a correlation between engine size and fuel efficiency. Based on the diagram above, pick a description from the list below that best describes the correlation between engine size and fuel efficiency. Explain your choice in relation to fuel efficiency and engine size. So they want us to pick one of these 4 options. Okay, now correlation scores between -1 and +1. -1 is a strong negative correlation. Okay, like if it's almost like a fairly straight line. Okay, hinted. A weak negative would be they're going down, but they're kind of all over the place. No correlation, 0 would be just everything's just literally all over the place. There's no obvious connection. Weak positive would be kind of going up in this general direction, and then a strong positive would be much more linear in its approximation. So this is obviously going down. So it's not weak positive, okay, or strong positive, okay. Now I always have a tendency to go, these aren't that close together, but I've learned my lesson, okay, and this would be strong negative, okay. Even though they're not in a perfect straight line, they are in a fairly straight line. Now, what does that mean? Okay, so as the engine size increases, fuel efficiency decreases. Therefore, the correlation will be negative. Okay, because fuel efficiency is going down as x gets bigger. In a sense, x gets bigger, gets smaller. Okay, this pattern is consistent and tight. Okay, thus indicating a strong relationship. And the marking scheme, just to read it off, says strong negative. Cars with greater engine size are less fuel efficient. Okay, but they're being much more direct than I have been in this particular blurb. Now, part B, part 2 says, Tom says that the correlation coefficient for two sets of data is 5. Explain why this cannot be correct. So they're kind of pre-wiring us to go, it's not correct. Why? Now, it's pretty simple. Okay, correlation scores between 1 and -1. 5 is not within that range. Okay, again, 1 would indicate a strong positive. 0 is no correlation. -1 is strong negative. Okay, so our data there was probably like 0.8, 0.9. I'd have to calculate it out, and it's a crazy calculation, which is why those kind of calculations now will be done for on a computer. There is a way of calculating that by hand, but it's awkward. Now, part C, part 1 is a 5 mark, and this is kind of going into hypothesis testing. And it says a random sample of 815 cars was picked from new cars in 2024. Part 1 says show that for this sample, the margin of error for a population proportion is 3.5%, correct to 1 decimal place. Now, the margin of error is a formula, and it's often used for polls, okay, and it's 1 over the root of n, with n being the sample size, okay. It's not actually given in the mass tables, as far as I'm aware. I've never found it, okay. The n value is the size of the sample, which is 815. Okay. Then when I put that number in here, that's like a crazy calculation, but we have a calculator. Okay. They wanted a percentage, so we're going to multiply by 100, and that gives me an answer of 3.5. And I think I've rounded that. I'm not sure, but just that matches up with the answer they gave us. So we're not asked to find it. Okay. We're just told confirm it. Okay. Without knowing this formula, you're going to be kind of messing. But if you try to do something, you might have a chance of getting some low partial, like the 2 marks, maybe by multiplying by 100, like putting 1 over 815 multiplied by 100 would probably get you the 2 marks, because even though, just try something. Okay. Now part 2 then says 106 of the 815 new cars bought in 2024 were electric cars. Work out the percentage of new cars in the sample that were electric cars. Give your answer correct to the nearest percent. That's a 5 marker. Now, it's not that tricky. To get a percentage, you always multiply by 100, okay? And you need to know the fraction. So the big number is always on the bottom, the smaller number on top. So 106 divided by 815 multiplied by 100 gives me 13.006. They asked me to round that to the nearest percent, which is 13. Okay, part 2. Now we get into the trickier thing here, which is the hypothesis test. And there's a kind of way of doing this. Now it's only worth 5 marks, and it's stereotypically, or at least from my experience, not that well answered. But there's a kind of way of doing it, so I'm just going to go right through it. You have to kind of use your margin of error, and they call this like p hat, okay, is plus or minus the margin of error. Now, we know that what we're talking about here, I must read the question, sorry, I never actually read the question. In 2023, 19.2% of all new cars bought were electric. A reporter claimed that the proportion of new electric cars being bought in 2024 was different to 2023. Use your answers to parts C1 and C2 to test the claim that the percentage of new electric cars being bought in 2024 is different from that in 2023 at the 5% level of significance. Show relevant calculations, state your conclusions, and give a reason for your answer. And they've given me these in the exam paper. So if you kind of just learn off what to do, you have to kind of memorize this formula. Okay, we're going to add on our margin of error, and we're going to take away our margin of error. So I'm going to take away first. So our kind of range goes from 9.5% to 16.5%. Within 95%, you're plussing and minus the margin of error once. Okay, and that gives me a range between 9.5 and 16.5. Now, the conclusion then is the evidence, this evidence, shows that the percentage of new electric cars being bought in 2024 is different than in 2023. In 2023, it was 19.2. 19.2 does not lie between this interval, okay, and therefore we reject the null hypothesis, okay, and that's it, okay. So it's a bit of a odd question, but what I always find is that the way the questions work is in a way simple. If you can get the margin of error, okay, you got your marks tied away. This wasn't that hard. It was kind of pretty straightforward. If this gives you a problem, just remembering that you have to add and subtract the percentage from the other percentage, if that's not too vague, you'll definitely get the low partial. If you lose out on 3 marks on a really tricky question, so be it. But there is a strategy there. Just actually add and subtract them. You might be up to maybe not the higher partial. Okay, but that it'll all depend on the question. Anyway, that's the end of question 8. So as always, if you want a copy of the notes I'm working off, send me an email to shanetroy@gmail.com. Like and subscribe to get access to more playlists. Best of luck.